The twin suns of New Haven Colony cast long shadows across the bustling marketplace as Admiral Kim Han made her way between the colorful stalls. At 74, her steps were measured but steady, each one carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through far more dangerous places than this peaceful trading hub. Her silver hair was pulled back in a simple bun, despite her age. Her dark eyes remained sharp and alert, constantly scanning her surroundings out of pure habit. The market was alive with activity. Human colonists haggled with Tauran merchants over exotic fruits, while mechanical service drones hummed overhead carrying packages to waiting customers. The air smelled of spiced meats and alien flowers, a mixture that had become comfortingly familiar over her 5 years of retirement on this quiet world. Hannah paused at her favorite vegetable stand, run by an elderly human couple who had arrived on New Haven decades ago. She carefully selected fresh tomatoes and leafy greens, placing them gently in her woven shopping bag alongside the morning's other purchases. The simple act of choosing her own food still felt luxurious after years of military rations and mess hall meals. Beautiful day, isn't it, Admiral? Called out Mrs. Chen, the vendor's wife, though she always forgot that Hannah preferred to keep her military rank private these days. Just Hannah, please, she replied with a warm smile, counting out the local currency chips. And yes, it's perfect weather for gardening. As she turned to continue her shopping, 3 figures emerged from the shadows between two market stalls. They were Veltari, a warrior species known throughout the galaxy for their aggressive nature and superiority complex. These particular specimens were young adults, their bright blue scales still unmarked by battle scars, their yellow eyes gleaming with arrogance and something else, the telltale redness that came from drinking too much fermented kola root. The largest of the 3, standing nearly 7 feet tall with pronounced ridges along his skull, stepped directly into Hannah's path. His companions flanked him, their razor-sharp claws extending slightly from their fingertips in what their species considered a casual threat display. Well, the leader drawled, his voice carrying the typical Veltari accent that made every word sound like a growl. Look what we have crawling through our marketplace. Another pathetic human. Hannah stopped walking, but didn't step back. She had faced down entire fleets of enemy warships. 3 drunk youngsters weren't going to intimidate her. Round them, other shoppers began to notice the confrontation. Several humans started moving away, while alien merchants pretended to be suddenly very interested in organizing their wares. This is a public market, Hannah said calmly, her voice carrying just enough authority to make the leader's companion shift uncomfortably. I'm just doing my shopping. The second Veltari, slightly smaller but with more elaborate scale patterns, left harshly. Did you hear that, Crix? The old mammal thinks she belongs here with real warriors, I heard, Crix replied, taking another step closer. Maybe we should teach her some respect for her betters. The market had grown noticeably quieter now. Even the service drones seemed to be giving their group a wider berth. Hannah could see Captain Rodriguez, the local security chief, speaking urgently into his communicator from across the square, but she knew he was too far away to intervene quickly. Hannah carefully set her shopping bags down on the ground, making sure her precious tomatoes wouldn't be damaged if things got rough. The movement was slow and deliberate, causing the 3 Veltari to lean in closer, mistaking her caution for fear. Smart human, sneered the 3rd alien, whose scales were darker than his companions. Knows when she's outmatched. You boys should really move along, Hannah said, straightening up slowly. Her voice remained steady, but there was something in her tone now that made a few nearby aliens take an unconscious step backward. I'm trying to have a peaceful afternoon. This only made the trio laugh louder. Crix gestured dramatically with his clawed hands. The ancient human thinks she can. Give orders to Veltari warriors. Did you serve in some colonial defense force, old woman? Learn to bark commands at other weaklings. Something like that. Hannah replied quietly. The leader moved even closer, now close enough that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. Well, your little human authority means nothing here. This sector belongs to the strong now. That's when Hannah reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a small and remarkable device about the size of an old Earth smartphone. Its surface was matte black with just a few discrete buttons and a tiny screen. To most observers, it looked like any other personal communicator, but as her weathered fingers moved across its surface with practiced precision, entering a sequence she hadn't used in over 20 years. The device began to emit a soft blue glow. The Veltari were too busy posturing to notice, but several of the alien merchants in nearby stalls suddenly looked very interested in what the old human woman was doing. The communicator connected to a network that spanned half the galaxy, reaching receivers that most people didn't even know existed. The small device in Hannah's hand hummed to life as quantum encryption protocols activated across 17 different star systems. The communicator's screen flickered with symbols that most people in the galaxy had never seen, the sacred codes of the Terran Defense Network's highest command structure. This is Admiral Kim Hannah, service code Delta 957. She spoke clearly into the device, her voice carrying the same calm authority she had used to command entire battle fleets. Requesting immediate support at my current location, the three Veltai erupted into howls of laughter. Crix doubled over, slapping his knee with his clawed hand while his companions pointed at the elderly woman mockingly. Admiral, Crix wheezed between laughs. Did you hear that, boys? This crazy old human thinks she's some kind of military commander. Maybe she was a janitor on a transport ship. Sneered the second Veltari. That's probably the closest any human gets to real military service. The third alien wiped tears from his yellow eyes. Admiral Kim Hannah. What's next, old woman? Are you going to tell us you're the Queen of Earth too? But while the Veltari continued their mockery, something extraordinary was happening in the space above New Haven Colony, high above the planet's atmosphere. Monitoring stations that had been quietly scanning deep space for decades suddenly blazed to life with urgent alerts. Lieutenant Commander Songmira almost choked on her morning tea as her workstation exploded. With priority signals, the young officer had been manning the Outer Rim listening post for 3 years, and nothing more exciting than merchant ship traffic reports had ever crossed her desk. Now her screens were flashing red with emergency codes she had only seen in training simulations. Command. This is Station 7 Alpha. She stammered into her headset. I'm receiving a Delta 9 authentication signal from the surface of New Haven. The code is registered to Admiral Kim Hannah. The response from headquarters came back immediately. Crackling with disbelief, Station 7 Alpha, please repeat. Did you say Kim Hannah? Confirmed. Command. The Iron Phoenix herself. Across the Terran Defense Network, officers who had been going about their routine duties suddenly found themselves in the middle of the biggest military alert in 20 years. On the massive dreadnought Indomitable, Admiral Park Ji-han was reviewing supply reports when his aide burst into his ready room without even knocking. Double quotes, sir. Priority Alpha message from Network Command. Park Ji-han looked up from his paperwork. Annoyed at the interruption, this better be important. Lieutenant, it's Admiral Kim Hannah. Sir, she's requesting immediate support. The coffee mug slipped from Park Ji-han's fingers, shattering on the metal deck as hot liquid splashed across his boots. For a moment, he could only stare at his aide in stunned silence. Kim Hannah, he whispered, the Iron Phoenix. Are you absolutely certain? Her personal authentication codes just activated, sir. She's on New Haven Colony. Park Ji-hon was already moving, shouting orders as he strode toward the bridge. Battle stations, all hands to battle stations, helm, plot a course for New Haven, maximum burn. The Indomitable's massive engines roared to life, their fusion cores pushing the kilometer-long warship beyond safe acceleration limits. But Park Ji-hon didn't care about safety protocols right now. Every officer in the Terran fleet knew the stories about Kim Hanna, the brilliant tactician who had pulled humanity back from the brink of extinction during the Void Wars on the bridge. His tactical officer looked up from her displays with wide eyes. Sir, we're receiving similar activation signals from the Thunderbolt and the Relentless. Both ships are changing course to intercept. Good. Park Ji-hon replied grimly. Signal all ships in the sector. If Admiral Kim needs help, she's going to get it. The Thunderbolt was closer to New Haven. And Captain Lee Subin pushed her engines even harder when the alert came through. Her ship was one of the newer designs, sleek and deadly, bristling with plasma cannons and missile pods. The crew moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared for whatever threat could possibly require the Iron Phoenix to break her 20-year silence. Captain called out her sensor operator. I'm reading massive energy signatures from multiple ships converging on our position. It looks like half the Third Fleet is responding to this call. Lee Subin nodded grimly. As they should. Kim Hanna once held off an entire Zirian armada with just 5 ships. If she's calling for help, it's serious. Meanwhile, the massive battleship, Relentless, cut through space like an angry giant. Its commander, Admiral Cho Kyun-soo, personally overseeing every system as his crew prepared for combat. The ship's artificial intelligence was already running combat scenarios, its quantum processors calculating thousands of possible threats that might require their intervention. Back on New Haven's surface, Hannah waited patiently as the 3 Veltari continued their laughter, completely unaware that 3 of the most powerful warships in human space were racing toward their location at speeds that defied physics. The old admiral glanced at her communicator's screen, watching as confirmation. Signals began appearing from ships across the sector. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. It seemed her reputation still carried some weight after all these years. The first sign that something was wrong came as a low rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. The bustling sounds of the marketplace gradually faded, as shoppers and merchants alike looked up at the sky with growing concern. What had been a clear, sunny afternoon was rapidly turning dark, as massive shadows began blocking out the twin suns of New Haven. Crix, still chuckling at what he thought was an old woman's delusion, was the last to notice the change. "What's that noise?" he asked, his laughter dying in his throat as he followed his companion's horrified gazes upward. 3 enormous shapes were descending through the atmosphere, their hulls gleaming like polished steel against the darkening sky. The Indomitable appeared first, its massive bulk easily the size of a small city. The kilometer-long dreadnought's engines burned brilliant blue as it slowly positioned itself directly over the marketplace. The ship's weapon ports were clearly visible along its hull, each one capable of leveling entire city blocks. The Thunderbolt emerged from the cloud's necks, sleeker and more aggressive in design, its angular surfaces bristling with missile launchers and plasma cannon rays. The newer vessel moved with predatory grace as it took up position to the east, its sensors already locked onto the small group gathered around the elderly human woman. Finally, the Relentless broke through the cloud cover, its ancient but deadly frame scarred by countless battles. This ship was a veteran of the Void Wars, and every alien species in the galaxy knew to fear its distinctive silhouette. The massive battleship's rival sent a wave of panic through the non-human population of the Marketplace. The three Veltari stood frozen in terror as the reality of their situation began to sink in. These weren't just any human ships. These were the flagships of the Terran Defense Network. Vessels that had carved their names into galactic history through decades of victorious campaigns. Impossible, whispered the second Veltari, his scales turning pale with fear. How did they get here so fast? Before anyone could answer, the air around them filled with the screaming sound of atmospheric fighters, a squadron of 12. Raptor-class interceptors roared overhead in perfect formation, their sleek forms cutting through the air like deadly arrows. The fighters were followed by heavier Falcon gunships, their weapon systems already powering up as they established a perimeter around the entire marketplace. The ground shook again as the first dropship broke through the sound barrier, its massive bulk descending toward the plaza with controlled violence. The transport vessel was painted in the dark gray colors of the Terran Marine Corps, and its armored hull bore the scars of countless combat deployments. Steam hissed from its landing thrusters as it touched down just 50 meters from where Hannah stood calmly beside her shopping bags. The dropship's rear end slammed down with a hydraulic hiss, and 12 figures in powered combat armor stormed out in perfect formation. Each Marine stood over 7 feet tall in their mechanical suits, their weapon systems already active and targeting the 3 Veltari aliens. The armor's servos whined softly as the soldiers moved, their helmet displays flickering with tactical information. 2 more dropships landed in quick succession, disgorging additional squads of Marines who quickly established a secure perimeter. Round the marketplace, civilian shoppers were already fleeing in panic, but the Marines' weapons remained trained solely on the 3 troublemakers who had dared to threaten their legendary admiral. The lead Marine stepped forward, his armor bearing the rank insignia of a captain. Through his helmet's external speakers, his voice carried the crisp authority of a professional soldier. "Admiral Kim Hanna," Captain Lee Min-ho said, snapping to attention and delivering a perfect military salute. "3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, reporting for duty. We came as fast as we could. Ma'am, what are your orders?" The sight was almost surreal. Dozens of humanity's most elite soldiers, supported by 3 of the most powerful warships ever built, responding to the call of a single elderly woman standing peacefully among scattered vegetables and shopping bags. Crix's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, his yellow eyes wide with terror as he finally understood exactly who he had been threatening. This wasn't just any retired human. This was Kim Hanna, the Iron Phoenix, the woman whose tactical genius had saved humanity during their darkest hour. "The Iron Phoenix," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We threatened the Iron Phoenix." His 2 companions were in no better shape. The second Veltari was shaking so violently that his scales were rattling together, while the third had gone completely rigid with fear. All around the marketplace, other alien species were backing away in reverence and terror, recognizing the legendary admiral who had once commanded fleets that spanned entire star systems. Overhead, the 3 massive battleships maintained their positions, their weapon systems powered but not yet targeted. The message was clear. Humanity's most powerful military assets were ready to respond to any threat against their greatest hero. Admiral Park Ji-hon's voice crackled through the Marine captain's comm system, broadcast from the bridge of the Indomitable. "High above, Admiral Hanna, this is Park Ji-hon. The entire 3rd Fleet is at your disposal. Just give us the word." But Hanna simply smiled, looking at the terrified Veltari with something that might have been pity. She reached down to pick up her shopping bags, careful not to bruise the tomatoes she had selected earlier. "Stand down, Captain," she said softly to the Marine commander, her voice carrying easily over the sound of idling engines and humming power armor. I think our young friends here have learned their lesson. Within minutes of the massive fleet's arrival over New Haven, quantum communication networks across the galaxy blazed to life with urgent transmissions. The sight of 3 Terran dreadnoughts responding to a simple marketplace disturbance sent shockwaves through every alien government from the core worlds to the outer rim territories. On the Veltari homeworld of Scarveth, Supreme War Chief Thakma was enjoying his midday meal when his aide burst into the Great Hall without ceremony. The massive alien leader's crimson scales darkened with anger at the interruption, but his rage quickly turned to ice-cold fear when he heard the report. "Supreme Chief," the aide gasped. His breathing ragged from running. "Emergency transmission. From New Haven Colony. 3 of our young warriors have. They have threatened Admiral Kim Hanna." The ceremonial bone cup slipped from Thakma's clawed hand, clattering across the stone floor as its contents spilled like blood. Every other Veltari in the hall fell silent, their eyes wide with terror. The name Kim Hanna was burned into their species' collective memory. The human who had crushed their greatest military uprising in less than a week. "Impossible," Thakma whispered. "The Iron Phoenix has been retired for decades. She disappeared after the Void Wars ended. Sir, she's very much alive. And the entire Terran Third Fleet is currently positioned over New Haven in response to her distress call." Thakma's massive frame shuddered as he remembered the stories his own father had told him about the siege of Kethva Prime. How Admiral Kim's brilliant tactics had turned what should have been an easy Veltari victory into a complete rout. How she had outmaneuvered 5 full battle fleets with just a handful of human ships, using their own aggression against them. "Send immediate apologies," he commanded, his voice shaking. "Full diplomatic immunity for the Admiral. Whatever she wants, give it to her. And bring those idiotic youngsters home before they get us all killed." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of other worlds as news of the incident spread through galactic communication networks. The Zirian Collective's ruling council went into emergency session, while the Trade Federation immediately suspended all military exercises near human space. Nobody wanted to risk being seen as a threat while the legendary Admiral was active again, back on New Haven. The 3 young Veltari remained on their knees in the marketplace, surrounded by the most elite soldiers humanity had ever produced. Crix couldn't stop his hands from shaking as he stared up at the elderly human woman who had just casually summoned the galaxy's most feared military force with a single phone call. Admiral Kim Hanna stood quietly among her scattered groceries, seemingly unbothered by the massive display of firepower that surrounded her. The Marines maintained their defensive positions, their weapon systems still active but no longer directly targeting the terrified aliens overhead. The 3 battleships cast their shadows across the entire colony, their presence a stark reminder of humanity's reach across the stars. "I want you boys to understand something," Hannah said gently, her voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet of the marketplace. "I didn't call these ships here to hurt you. I called them because that's what happens when you threaten any human, anywhere in this galaxy." She gestured toward the Marines surrounding them, their power armor gleaming in the filtered sunlight. "These soldiers didn't come here because I'm special. They came because we humans have a simple rule. We take care of our own, every single one of us. From the youngest colonist to the oldest veteran." Crix found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Admiral, we didn't know. We were just. You were drunk and looking for someone weaker to pick on." Hannah interrupted, but her tone remained calm. "The problem is, you picked the wrong species. Humans don't have a caste system like yours. We don't abandon our elderly or consider them worthless. When you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us." She bent down slowly to retrieve her shopping bags, careful not to make any sudden movements that might alarm the nervous Marines. I've been retired for 20 years. All I want is to tend my garden, read my books, and live in peace. I grew the most beautiful roses you've ever seen, and my tomatoes won prizes at the colony fair," as she straightened up. Holding her simple groceries, the contrast was almost absurd. Here was a woman who could command the loyalty of entire fleets, who had reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy through her tactical brilliance, and she was worried about getting her vegetables home before they wilted. "But if you or anyone else threatens any human again," she continued, her dark eyes meeting each of the Veltari in turn, "remember this moment. Remember what happened when 3 drunk youngsters decided to bully an old woman in a marketplace, Captain." Lee Minho stepped forward, his armored bulk dwarfing even the tall Veltari aliens. "Admiral, shall we escort these individuals off-world?" Hannah shook her head. "No, Captain. I think they understand now. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones that don't end in violence." She began walking toward the edge of the marketplace, moving with the same unhurried pace she had maintained throughout the entire incident. The Marines automatically formed a protective formation around her, their armor systems scanning for any additional threats. "Stand down to yellow alert," she called back to Captain Lee. "But maintain position until I confirm I'm safely home." "Standard procedure." "Yes, ma'am," the captain replied crisply. "Third Fleet will remain on station until you give the all-clear." As the small procession made its way through the now empty streets toward Hannah's modest home, the 3 Veltari slowly picked themselves up from the ground. They were alive and harmed, and free to go, a mercy that their own species would never have shown in similar circumstances. The morning sun was just beginning to peep over the hills surrounding New Haven Colony when Hannah heard the soft chimming of her door sensor. She set down her cup of tea and walked to the window, surprised to see 3 familiar figures standing nervously on her front porch. The young Veltari from yesterday's incident were back. But this time they looked very different. Gone was the arrogant swagger and drunken bravado. Instead, Crix and his companion stood with their heads bowed respectfully, each carrying something in their clawed hands. The largest of the 3 held a beautiful arrangement of native New Haven flowers, brilliant purple blooms that only grew in the colony's rich soil. The other carried what appeared to be traditional Veltari peace offerings, intricately carved stone tablets that would have taken hours to create. Hannah opened her door slowly, genuinely curious about what these young aliens wanted. "Can I help you?" Crix stepped forward, his yellow eyes unable to meet hers directly. "Admiral Kim Hannah," he began, his voice shaking slightly. We have come to offer our most sincere apologies for yesterday's behavior. We were wrong, and we understand that now." He held out the flowers with trembling hands. "These are from the sacred gardens of our homeworld. They represent our deepest respect and our promise that we will never again dishonor ourselves or threaten any human." Hannah accepted the flowers graciously, inhaling their sweet fragrance. "They're beautiful, thank you." She stepped aside, gesturing toward her backyard. "I was just about to work in my garden. Would you like to join me?" The 3 Veltari exchanged surprised glances. They had expected anger, perhaps even a formal punishment. The last thing they had anticipated was an invitation to spend time with the legendary Admiral. You would allow us to help you?" asked the 2nd Veltari, whose name was Seth. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Hannah replied simply. "Besides, I have a lot of planting to do, and you 3 look strong enough to help with the heavy work for the next several hours." An extraordinary scene unfolded in Admiral Kim Hannah's modest backyard garden. The woman who had once commanded Fleets numbering in the thousands worked side by side with 3 young aliens, teaching them the careful art of growing vegetables. They planted tomatoes, peppers, and squash, with Hannah patiently explaining how each plant needed different amounts of water and sunlight. The Veltari, despite their fearsome appearance, proved to be surprisingly gentle workers. Their clawed hands, so threatening the day before, carefully cradled delicate seedlings as they placed them in the prepared soil. Crix showed particular skill at digging precise holes for the larger plants, while his companions eagerly fetched water and tools as needed. "Admiral," Crix said during a break, as they sat in the shade of Hannah's small porch, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, and please, just call me Hannah." The young Veltai struggled with his words for a moment. "Yesterday, you could have had us imprisoned. Or worse, your Marines were ready to follow any order you gave. Why did you show us mercy instead?" Hannah smiled, wiping dirt from her hands with an old towel. "Tell me, Crix, what do you know about the Void Wars?" "Only what our elders taught us," he replied carefully, "that humanity was outnumbered and outgunned, facing extinction. But somehow you turned the tide and won." "That's the simple version," Hannah nodded. "The truth is more complicated. Yes, we were losing badly, but we didn't win through superior firepower or better technology. We won because we understood something our enemies didn't." She gestured toward the garden they had been working on together. "Look at what we accomplished today. 3 different species, working together toward a common goal. That's humanity's real strength. We don't just defeat our enemies, we turn them into allies." Seth, the quieter of the 3, spoke up. "But the stories say you destroyed entire fleets, that you were ruthless in battle. When necessary." "Yes," Hannah admitted, "but every battle I fought, every ship I destroyed, was in service of a larger goal, ending the war so that peace could follow. Violence should always be the last option, not the first." The third Veltari, who had remained mostly silent, finally found his courage. "Our people teach that strength comes from dominance, that the weak deserve whatever happens to them. And how has that philosophy worked out for your species?" Hannah asked gently. "Are you stronger now, or are you constantly fighting among yourselves and with your neighbors?" The young alien scales darkened with shame. We are often at war, even with our own kind." "Exactly," Hannah said. "Real strength comes from building something bigger than yourself, from protecting those who can't protect themselves, from turning enemies into friends whenever possible." As the afternoon wore on, word of the unusual scene in Admiral Kim's garden began to spread throughout the colony. Human settlers and alien residents alike found excuses to walk past her house, curious to see the legendary military commander working peacefully alongside the same Veltari who had threatened her the day before. Captain Lee Minho, still maintaining his Marine unit's presence on the colony, received regular reports about his admiral's activities. When his lieutenant suggested they might want to maintain closer surveillance, the captain shook his head. "The admiral knows what she's doing," he said firmly. "If she says those 3 are no longer a threat, then they're no longer a threat. That's good enough for me." By evening, news of the day's events had reached the Veltai home world through the same quantum communication networks that had carried yesterday's panic. Supreme War Chief Thakma found himself staring at images of his species' young warriors learning agriculture from the galaxy's most feared military tactician. Incredible. He murmured to his advisors, "She really did it. She turned them." As the twin sun set over New Haven Colony, Hannah stood in her garden admiring the day's work. The newly planted vegetables were already settling into their soil, and the Veltoi had proven to be excellent helpers. More importantly, 3 young aliens who had started the day as potential enemies were ending it as friends. Thank you for today, Crix said as the 3 prepared to leave. We learned more than just gardening. Come back any time. Hannah replied warmly. Gardens always need tending, and good help is hard to find. As they walked away, the youngest Veltari turned back. One last time, Admiral. Hannah, the galaxy is lucky to have humans like you. Hannah smiled and returned to watering her plants. High above, the stars were beginning to appear, and somewhere among them, the Third Fleet was finally standing down from alert status. The crisis was over. But the lesson would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. Never underestimate a human, especially one who has earned the right to rest. But more importantly, never underestimate humanity's ability to turn enemies into allies through simple acts of kindness and understanding. The end.